Well, hello, happy daylight savings. Did you guys all, spring forward? Yeah, it's like a bad day, right? No one, it's like on church, in church world, just so you know, this is like Armageddon for church world. It's an hour earlier, it's like spring break, but we're so excited that you are here with us. My name's Kyle, and we are in the second part of our series called Frantic. And so if you were here last week, you know kind of where we're going, but I just wanted to give you a quick heads up. So this series actually took shape way back in October and November of this year. So what we did is our staff got together. We were brainstorming ideas about sermon series. I wanted to get some different perspective, and so I said, hey, tell me about what you think we should talk about. And it was interesting, though, that as we started to brainstorm, every single person on our staff team, everyone in that meeting, each had this idea that, hey, you know what, we need to address the frantic, crazy pace of our lives. Everyone brought this idea. They said, hey, you know, we need to do a series about creating margin, about experiencing peace and rest, and trying to get a grip on the pace, and again, the frantic nature of our lives. And so I'm very excited. Last week, we kicked off this series by doing what I thought was some pretty deep soul searching. We began this series by asking a question: who is your shepherd? Or what is your shepherd? And what that meant is we were asking ourselves the question of who or where are we looking to get what we need at a deep soul level? Where do we go to have our souls restored and refreshed and renewed? What we learned by looking at Psalm 23, the psalmist David writes this beautiful poem about the Lord being his shepherd. That in a sense that God is his shepherd, that God is the one who is providing for him and who gives us everything we need, again, at that deep soul level. So it started there with asking that question, who or what is our shepherd? We realize there's lots of shepherds out there. There's lots of things that guide us, that influence us, and it might be the shepherd of success. It might be the shepherd of busyness. It might be the shepherd of physical wealth, but we all are being led and guided by something. But we learn that only when our shepherd is God, only when we're being led by God, can we really experience what we need. Oh, I'll get a little ring there, Chris, if we could. So this week I'm excited because we are going to be tackling a particular topic that I think really represents one of the biggest distractions and challenges from us experiencing God as our shepherd, and that is the challenge and the obstacle of social media. All right, so last week I told you about this, so you might be already a little bit apprehensive. But today, after our time together, I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to challenge our entire family as a church to turn off social media for an entire week. Yeah. Everyone's like, I don't know. I'll just tell you this before we get into our content for today. I have never received more comments, concerns, frustrations about a message I have not even preached yet than I have this week. People have been emailing me, I don't think this is a very good idea. I don't think I can do this. Where is this found in the Bible, right? People are like challenging the very notion of taking a break from social media. And it's crazy because I think what it does is it tells us, it sort of reveals at a deeper level how prevalent of an issue this is in our culture. Did you know that 81% of the people in the United States, 81% of all Americans have at least one social media platform? Just so you know, the number of Americans who vote is 50%. More people participate in Facebook than in democracy. That should scare us a little bit, should it not? You know, it's pretty hard for us to think about the idea of turning off social media because the reality is social media has become so prevalent. It's become such a deep part of our culture and society. You know, today at first service, people were coming after and they're saying, well, wait a second, I'm trying to run a business all on Facebook. Or they're trying to say, I'm not able to communicate with my family outside of Facebook. And it's like, whoa. It kind of gives us a little bit of an insight into how prevalent social media is. And I just want to also quickly call out, I realize that everyone in the room today might not be participating in social media. There might be a few of you say, hey, I don't have a social media, and I would just say, is it lonely on that ivory tower? No, but I realize some people here, yeah, hey, you might not be on social media, or you say, hey, I have a social media, I check it once a year. That's totally cool. What I'm committing to you today is we're going to talk about 3 big problems that social media creates in our culture, but it's certainly not limited to people on social media. We're going to talk about some things that you will be able to relate with, regardless of whether you're on Facebook or Instagram, whatever you're doing. Really, these principles are the same no matter who you are. Because we also struggle with the whole pervasiveness of technology. So, hey, sit back and realize that everyone's going to get preached at today. It's not just people with social media. It's not people who are just addicted to social media. But even on a personal level, I have to just be honest, social media and my personal use of social media is oftentimes problematic. I started to become aware a little while ago, probably around the first of the year, that some of the best moments of my day I spend on social media. I oftentimes can wake up and I can look at my phone and I can start looking through my Instagram feed as the first thing I do when I wake up. Before I go to bed, oftentimes I'll just check to see if there's anything happening on Facebook. I personally don't use Snapchat because I'm embarrassed to admit I can't use it. But I'm wondering, though, if a lot of us have that feeling. You realize that during the day, maybe you just spend a little bit too much of your free time being absorbed in technology or in social media. How many times do you go to the grocery store nowadays, and if there's a line, people are doing what? I mean, we're not even trying to have a conversation with the person in front or behind us. We spend every extra moment of our day absorbed by social media or technology more generally. And so really what I started to feel convicted about it, and actually I mentioned this last week, in the month of February, I just said, hey, I'm taking 30 days. I'm stopping social media. I'm deleting all of my apps. I'm going to say no for a little while and just see what happens. And I will tell you, we'll talk about this at the end, man, it really did a lot for me emotionally, spiritually, mentally. And I feel like it really showed me some of the issues that I was having in my life, and my hope is that you might be able to experience that. Because I'm going to bet that no matter who you are today, no one here would say, you know what, I need to spend more of my time. I need to spend less of my time with my family, my friends, and career. I need to spend more time investing in social media. I'm guessing no one would say that. Right? So I think this is an area that we all struggle with to varying degrees. And again, even if you're not on social media, listen close, because these principles are going to apply to you as well. So what we're going to do for the rest of our time together today is we're going to look at 3 negative aspects of social media, some things that I really feel that social media does that are detrimental to our culture and our society. Then we're going to see how Scripture answers those concerns, and we're going to find out what are the biblical principles that we ought to adhere to. And at the last part of the message, we'll bring it back. It'll be really practical, and you'll be able to take something home that you can apply no matter, again, whether you're on social media or not. So if you're taking notes today, write this down. So the first negative impact of social media is that it creates conflict. Social media creates conflict. So we're really familiar with this idea. Who here has ever heard of some sort of like famous Twitter feud or a Twitter beef? Right, we have Facebook feuds between certain people. We have Twitter beefs, like Kim Kardashian is like getting mad at Taylor Swift, who's then getting mad at Kim Kardashian. It turns out that Kim Kardashian actually caught Taylor. Apparently I'm the only one who is aware of that Twitter beef. And I'm not saying anything about the particular content of this person's tweets, but our current administration, our current president is famous for interacting with people on Twitter, and you might agree with him, you might disagree with him, but we can all agree that sometimes that might just be not the best medium to call people out on Twitter, right? But we're pretty well aware of this whole idea of Twitter conflicts and social media conflicts. We also sometimes, isn't there some sort of like a little bit of a kind of a twisted satisfaction we get about listening to people argue online? Where we get to kind of observe what's happening and you're wondering, what are they going to say next? And it might be a famous person, but it might be someone in your family, right? You see 2 of your in-laws just kind of going at it on Facebook. Someone throws out this like passive-aggressive comment at no one. When people get on Facebook and say, I'm just saying. And then you get someone else saying, well, I'm just saying. And then they start fighting. We recognize that it's wrong, but we also get some sort of twisted satisfaction about being a part of it. Sometimes we often use We often use social media to espouse particularly controversial political or social views. We almost use these platforms that's called trolling, right? You're trying to get a response from someone. You're trying to say something inflammatory, or you're trying to say something controversial to elicit a response out of other people. And let me just tell you this as a quick side. According to the Center for Made-Up Statistics, the people who have changed their mind based on your political or social rant is 0. It is 0. It does not work. But regardless of it being effective or not, the reality is conflict on social media is downright unbiblical. See, in Matthew 18, Jesus actually tells us in black and white terms what it means to have healthy conflict resolution. Let's turn there. So in Matthew 18, verse 15, it says this. These are Jesus' words, remember. It says, if another believer sins against you, go privately and point out the offense. If the other person listens and confesses it, you have won that person back. But if you are unsuccessful, take 1 or 2 others with you and go back again, so that everything that you say may be confirmed by 2 or 3 witnesses. If the person still refuses to listen, take your case to the church. If he or she won't accept the church's decision, then treat that person as a pagan or as a corrupt tax collector. Think of that as like an IRS agent. No offense to IRS agents, but I tell you the truth. Whatever you forbid on earth will be forbidden in heaven, and whatever you permit on earth will be permitted in heaven. I also tell you this. If 2 of you agree here on earth concerning anything you ask, my Father in heaven will do it for you. For where 2 or 3 are gathered together as my followers, I am there among them. A couple of principles from this passage. First of all, Jesus tells us who the responsibility rests with as it relates to conflict resolution. If someone offends you, if someone commits an offense against you or does something wrong to you, Jesus says that the onus and responsibility is on you to address that offense. Jesus is saying, hey, don't sit back on the sidelines waiting for someone to apologize. First of all, they either don't know that they offended you, or B, that they meant to offend you, and guess what? They ain't apologizing to you anyways. So he's saying, go to that person, but what's the key principle? Go to that person privately. Go to that person, presumably, well, in Jesus' time, it would have been face-to-face, but go to that person directly. Say, hey, I want to go to coffee with you, or schedule a phone call, or a FaceTime meeting, but some sort of face-to-face meeting where you can hear one another, where you can share your concerns, you can share how that person has affected you in a negative way. He says, go to them. And if they say, hey, I recognize that, I'm sorry, guess what? It's done. You leave it there, you have won that person over, and according to this biblical principle, you are in right standing. He says, hey, if you do this, you go to that person and they say, I'm not addressing this, I'm not saying sorry, do whatever. He says, then go grab a couple of other people and then address it as a group. Now, I would tell you that it would be very wise of you to make sure that these 2 or 3 people are mature Christ followers. Why? Because someone needs to tell you if you're off base first. And if you are in the right, or if you are justified in your concern, they will come and help you resolve that issue. That's why we have elders and pastors at BridgeWay. Students, that's why we have leaders in your life, so that they can help you in those moments where there's conflict, where they can keep you from sinning, because it's oftentimes that we can start to sin because of somebody else's sin against us. So they can keep you in check, and they can also help to provide a safe context and environment for you to experience a healthy conflict resolution. And he says, continue that. And if they don't listen, then you bring them to the church, and there can be more steps taken. But what's really interesting here is what Jesus says afterwards. He says, hey, look, in a sense, the way that you handle conflict reflects a spiritual reality. He says, what you allow on heaven will be allowed, or on earth will be allowed in heaven. In a sense, the way that you and I handle conflict has much bigger implications than simply a problem being solved or not. And so what Jesus is saying is, hey, look, you have got to stay here. He gives us the formula for biblical conflict resolution. Under no circumstances does this happen on social media. You cannot have biblical conflict resolution on an electronic platform that's visible for all to see. That is not the biblical standard. And I would say that even if you have a legitimate offense, you give up the high ground, biblically speaking, if you do not go about resolving conflict in a healthy way. So Jesus is saying, hey, look, there is a way to handle conflict, and it has nothing to do with you getting a whole bunch of people around or having a really great reply to your comments and having this conversation thread for all to see. He says, go privately. Handle it in a way where there is integrity and where there can be genuine resolution. And in a sense, it's like, hey, look, you will fall into the wrong if you do not approach conflict resolution the right way. The second point is that social media corrupts contentment. Yeah, I heard a great quote once that said that social media is the highlight reel of our lives. I think this is true, right? If you have a social media profile, if you're taking a photo of yourself, remember the last time you took a selfie? Who here's taken a selfie in the last year? Just be honest. There's more of you. Yeah, come on, raise them up proud. Just a quick poll. No, I'm not going to, that was enough poll. I'm going to bet the last time you took a selfie, you did not take one photo and then just took it and posted it on Instagram, did you? You took 10, right? You took one and you realized, oh, my chin looks a little fat there. So you kind of, you do this. Have you ever noticed that's how you take a selfie? It's kind of, you want to get the most flattering angle. You want to make sure that once you get the best angle, you get the filter just right. Because, right, we're always using filters because, let's be honest, we're not that good looking. We need filters to help digitally enhance what we have on our screens. Right? We take the best possible moments of our lives and we make that the thing we post on social media. We never post a photo of our bowl of Cheerios in the morning, right? No, we post our highlight reel. And this is so prevalent, especially when we look at celebrities. We follow celebrities on social media or we're aware of these sort of extraordinary people. And we see that they can't, somehow they're unable to fly coach. They always have, private jets to fly on. There's these lavish vacations that we see. And even if they're not a celebrity, people in our own lives, we oftentimes compare ourselves to them, don't we? Why? Because, man, she seems to have the perfect life. She's got kids, but for some reason, everyone's, wearing cute clothes all the time. She's got her life put together. We compare the mundane nature of our lives to the highlight reel of someone else's. And this has nothing to do, you can be off social media and struggle with this just like someone on social media. You look at your coworkers and you say, well, why did he get the promotion? Why is it that she seems to have all of the favor and the authority? Why is it that I can't be whatever it is that I want to be? We compare ourselves to other people, and it ultimately corrupts our contentment because it says on a deeper level, it says, God, if you would just give me what they have, if you would just do what you've done for them, then I would be happy. In Philippians 4, the Apostle Paul writes a letter to a church. Now, Philippians, if you've studied the book of Philippians, it's known as the book of joy. That's because in a very short book, Paul uses the word joy more often than any other passage or any other book in the Bible. What's also even crazier than that is that Paul writes this letter in a prison cell. Yet Paul keeps talking about joy and being content and having everything that he needs. And I don't know about you, but whenever I see a documentary about someone in prison, I do not think that they have what they need. I do not look at them and say, hey, you've got a reason to be joyful and content where you are. I'm like, that must be a really terrible place to be. But what Paul does here, let's read this in Philippians 4. Let me just read it and then we'll talk about it. He says, not that I was ever in need, for I have learned how to be content with whatever I have. I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. I have learned the secret of living in every situation, whether it is with a full stomach or empty, with plenty or little. For I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. What Paul is saying, and Paul, if there's anyone who can speak to this subject with any kind of authority, it is Paul. He's saying that, hey, look, your contentment, your joy is not dependent on your external circumstances. Whether you have a lot or whether you have a little. Even worse, he would say, absolutely, it's never compared to it's never contingent on you having more or less stuff than someone else. He's saying true joy and true contentment doesn't come from an Instagram reel or your external circumstances or your lack or the presence or lack of a job or having enough money. He says all of that has nothing to do with your contentment. This is coming from a guy who's been shipwrecked, who's been imprisoned, who's been stoned, who's been beaten, who's been wrongly accused. If there's anyone who has the right to speak on the subject, is the Apostle Paul. And he says, hey, look, there's a secret that I've discovered. Your contentment and your joy doesn't come from out there. It comes not even from in here, but it comes from you having a relationship with Jesus Christ. He says that's what's ultimately going to give you joy and contentment. Last week we talked about Psalm 23. It's a famous passage written by the King David. He says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." He says, "The Lord is my shepherd." Another version puts it like this. He says, "I have everything that I need." See, contentment comes with the relationship with the shepherd. Contentment comes when you realize that you're relying on God to give you all the things that you need. And then when you ultimately realize that, that is when your soul becomes restored and refreshed. The problem with social media is it's the medium that we use to present the best possible image of ourselves. We want everyone to think that we are so great. We want everyone to like our post and to say, yeah, that's really cool. But what it can do for many of us is that we start to compare ourselves and we start to say, you know what, if only I had something that they did. If only God had blessed me the same way that he has blessed them, that's what would make me content. And Paul's saying, look, that's not where you find joy and contentment in the first place. So for us, hey, go post your picture of your fancy brunch. I actually think that's one of the very few legitimate uses of social media. Baby photos, wedding announcements, and cool pictures of food. Saying, keep social media, keep the comparison out of the picture because your contentment doesn't come from those things anyways. Your contentment comes when you are connected to Jesus Christ, and nothing else will ultimately give you the things that you truly need and that you truly desire apart from a relationship with him. Take it from Paul. If anyone can speak to it, this is him. It's him. Finally, social media kills connection. Now, this is an interesting phenomenon because the great promise of social media is that it promises that you have a deeper level of connection to more people and more places at more times than ever before. Facebook says you can have hundreds and you can have thousands of friends. Instagram says, hey, you can have thousands of followers. You'll be more connected. You will feel a greater sense of connection to people around you. Yet listen to what the American Journal of Preventive Medicine says about social media. It says it turns out that the people who reported spending the most time on social media, more than 2 hours a day, had twice the odds of perceived social isolation than those who said they had spent half an hour a day or less on those sites. And people who visited social media platforms most frequently, 58 visits per week or more, had more than 3 times the odds of perceived social isolation than those who visited fewer than 9 times per week. What does this mean? And this is not a Christian organization. This is simply they're stating facts. They're saying, in fact, social media has an inverse relationship to how you feel connected. The more you are on social media, the more time and the more energy you invest in social media, the more isolated you will feel. Why? Because social media actually kills connection. It does not create connection. Listen to what it says in Hebrews 10:23. It says, let us hold tightly without wavering to the hope that we affirm, for God can be trusted to keep his promise. This hope they're talking about is the hope of Jesus Christ. It's the hope of the gospel. Let's hold tightly to that hope, for God can be trusted to keep his promise. Let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. And let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. See, social media actually kills this connection that the writer of Hebrews is talking about. And for us at BridgeWay, connection is a really big deal. Our very mission statement, the core of what we are trying to accomplish is a threefold mission statement. The first part of our mission is to connect to God. The second part is to connect to others. And the third part is to connect others to God. We believe that ultimately the most important thing that you and I can do is to be connected to God, that you can have a relationship with Jesus, that ultimately you're connected to God on that kind of a level. That when the Lord is your shepherd, we want that to be a reality in your life. We also realize that following Jesus is not an individual activity. We see that as Jesus calls his followers, he says, hey, come follow me. But it's not just me and Jesus. It's me, Jesus, and a community of people around me. We talked about this a little while ago, that circles are better than rows, that you can't follow Jesus and do it alone. You need people around you. And finally, we talked about the mission statement is that connecting others to God. That means we realize that we've been given something. We have a hope and a joy that comes through Jesus, and we want to see other people experience that too. So we believe in trying to bring as many people to Jesus as we can. But what we're finding here is that social media, though it has some practical benefits, I'm not saying, of course, that social media is easy, or is evil, rather. But what we're finding is that social media is actually very detrimental to experiencing this kind of community. If your hope is in social media, then ultimately you will not experience the true joy that you can experience in Jesus. See, when we're trying to connect with God, it's much harder to connect with God when every spare moment of your day is taken up with social media, or maybe with technology more generally. The reality is, with this tool alone, we have a greater ability to shut out God, shut out other people than we ever have had in the history of the world. Why? It's because we have instant access to any number of diversions. And whether that's social media, or whether that's a favorite app you have, or simply just can't getting off the email, it's really hard to connect with the shepherd when you don't have any space for relationship. You know, the shepherd, when we talked about this last week, the shepherd and the sheep have a relationship. They have a dialogue. The shepherd knows each sheep by name, and the sheep understand the voice of the shepherd. In the Bible, it talks about God's voice as being a still, small voice. And I will tell you, my friends, it's very hard to hear that voice when we constantly crowd out our space and our silence with social media and with YouTube and with all of the things that we can crowd it out with. You know, it's hard to connect to other people face to face when we are more concerned with our social media presence on the internet versus the interpersonal relationships that we can have. We've all seen those photos of families at the restaurant, and everyone is on their phone around the dinner table. You've seen those just as much as I have. It's a sad reality that social media and that technology can actually distance ourselves. It actually can create isolation from those we're supposed to be meeting face to face with. Finally, it's really hard to help other people begin to follow Jesus when we're more concerned about people following us. When we're concerned more about our Snapchat streaks. I just become aware of Snapchat. Who here knows what a Snapchat? Okay, yeah, you guys know what I'm talking about. That's for those. I'm not on Snapchat, so that's for the people even younger than I am. It's hard to get other people excited about following into a relationship with Jesus when we're trying to grab followers for ourselves, or when we're more concerned about following our favorite social media stars. Ultimately, what this does is it starts to degrade our connection. We can't connect with each other. We cannot connect to God in the way that we're supposed to. So to review, social media creates conflict. It corrupts our contentment, and it kills connection. So the question is, what are we going to do about it? And last week, the challenge was to do some really deep self-examination, and I hope that you had some time last week to really ask the question, who is my shepherd? On that deep soul level, who or what am I relying on to get what I need? But today's going to be really practical. I want you to take away 3 simple things from today's conversation, and we'll talk about them really quickly. The first is that I want you to embrace this challenge to turn it off. I realize that you might have a social media platform, and I know that a lot of people spend lots of time on social media, but I'm asking you to, for 1 week, turn off all social media. And I would also extend this. If you're saying, hey, I'm not on social media, but I was talking to someone saying, hey, I've got my favorite app, I'm like, turn that off too. Give yourself some space to, well, we'll talk about that in a moment. Turn it off. That's the first thing you can do. The second thing you can do is help to get the word out. I posted last night on all my social accounts. Before I deleted them, I said, hey, I'm turning it off. I updated my profile picture with with a profile pic. We actually sent that to you. So check your email, and before you turn your social media platform off, post on your social media platform about the fact that you're not using your social media platform. I recognize there is irony in that. But in all seriousness, I have people back from Eugene who have no idea what we're doing here. They're like, okay, sounds great, right? What if you could have that kind of influence on someone around you? Or maybe that could be the beginning of a personal conversation with them about what's happening at BridgeWay or what God's doing in your life. Who knows what it could lead to? So help us get the word out. And the final thing, this isn't so much a point, but it's something you really need to realize. That turning off social media is not the end in itself. Nothing really will happen to you by just turning off a social media platform. Just say no to social media is not going to change your life. But what turning off social media will do, saying no to social media will help you, and it will make it absolutely easier for you to say yes to Jesus. By turning off social media, I guarantee you that you will, or again, expand this to technology, and maybe for you it's TV. I realize that you get home and the first thing you do is you turn on the TV. I get that. Whatever that thing is for you, and for a lot of people it's social media, but turn it off. You will realize that you have more emotional, spiritual, and social energy than you ever thought that you now get to choose where to invest that. You can choose in those extra minutes and hours of your day and your week to, instead of looking at your social media platform, you can actually say, hey, I'm going to actually use the best times of my day before I go to bed or right as I wake up. I'm going to use those to go into the scripture and to understand what God's will is for my life and to get to know this shepherd. You can use those extra moments to spend time in prayer. The Bible tells us to pray without ceasing. It's almost impossible to pray without ceasing with the presence of social media as it is today, or with technology in general. So use that moment. Don't just say no to social media. Say no so that you can say yes to what's really important, which is developing a relationship with the shepherd. If you're not on social media, ask yourself this. Hey, how do I resolve conflict? Ask yourself, where does my contentment and where my joy come from? Ask yourself, am I really committed to connecting to others? Am I committed to being at church every week? Am I committed to being involved in a small group? Because ultimately, it's just not about saying no, it's about saying yes to what God has called us to. So I hope you join me this week in this challenge, and I'd like to pray for us as we conclude our time together.